Today, we dive into a gripping tale from the history of the American West. We're exploring the life of a controversial figure, a fighter whose legend is both celebrated and debated. Known as Liver-Eating Johnston, he fought alongside the U.S. Army and also waged battles on his own. This man lived primarily in the rugged lands of Montana, and his story is steeped in myth and mystery. His real name was John Johnston, and his infamous nickname, Liver-Eating, comes from accounts claiming he would cut out and consume the livers of native warriors he defeated in battle. But is this horrifying detail a fact or a fabricated part of his legend? To uncover the truth, we turn to the 1983 issue of Old West magazine, which features two fascinating pieces. An excerpt from the 1958 book Crow Killer, The Saga of Liver-Eating Johnston, written by Raymond W. Thorpe and Robert Bunker, which delves into the legendary exploits of Johnston. A second article, The Truth About John Johnston by Harry J. Owens, which seeks to separate fact from fiction and challenge some of the myths perpetuated by the first account. First, we'll explore the traditional legend that cemented Johnston's larger-than-life reputation. Then, we'll analyze the second article, which sheds light on the historical truth, offering a more grounded perspective on his life. Are you ready to unravel the mystery of Liver-Eating Johnston? Let's begin. The story begins on a fateful May morning in 1847. It is said that Crow warriors killed and scalped the pregnant wife of John Johnston, a trapper living in the West. What followed became one of the most notorious tales of vengeance in American frontier history. For years, Johnston hunted Crow warriors, scalping them in return and, according to legend, eating their livers raw. But why the liver? Not for hunger, the story claims, but as a deliberate act. To Johnston, this gruesome ritual was a statement, one of defiance, power, and retribution. Other tribes, like the Blackfeet, had also wronged him, but none faced the level of wrath that the Crow endured. To them, Johnston became Dapiak Absroka, the Crow Killer, a name that struck fear into their hearts. Johnston's reputation grew to mythical proportions, becoming almost as effective as any weapon he carried. Tales spread of how warriors would flee after he killed just one of their own, the fear of facing him too great to bear. Even in captivity, other tribes would hesitate to harm him, hoping to trade him to the Crow for a hefty ransom. But Johnston was no ordinary man. He was cunning, strong, and some say unhinged. This made him a formidable ally in intertribal conflicts, where he would manipulate rivalries and claim scalps for his own gain. While his vendetta against the Crow seemed deeply personal, it also served to bolster his standing as a figure to be both feared and revered. Before becoming Liver-Eating Johnston, the young John Johnston had already made a name for himself as a skilled trapper and survivalist. Early on, he partnered with John Hatcher, a talkative frontiersman who helped spread stories of Johnston's exploits. One tale tells of how Johnston, initially portrayed as a naive greenhorn, quickly proved himself by outsmarting a traitor and spotting a supposedly dead warrior ready to strike. Later, Johnston joined forces with Del Guay, another infamous trapper, who played a key role in chronicling the Crow Killer's legacy. Del witnessed firsthand the moment Johnston supposedly killed the last of 20 Crow warriors sent to avenge their fallen. Del even admitted feeling sickened at the sight of Johnston extracting and consuming a liver, a detail that cemented his friend's fearsome reputation. Yet amidst the bloodshed, something unexpected happened. Johnston's relentless pursuit of vengeance eventually gave way to respect for the Crow people. Over time, the man who had been their fiercest enemy came to admire their courage and honor. In a dramatic twist, Johnston ended his feud and became an ally of the Crow, a testament to the complex relationships that defined the frontier era. In the spring of 1847, the peaceful rhythms of the frontier were shattered by a violent act that would give rise to one of the most chilling tales in Western history. According to legend, Crow warriors killed and scalped the pregnant wife of John Johnston, a trapper making his life in the wilderness. Consumed by grief and rage, Johnston embarked on a campaign of vengeance that would cement his name in infamy. For years, he hunted Crow warriors, taking their scalps, and as the story goes, consuming their livers raw. But why the liver? Not out of hunger, the accounts say, but as a deliberate statement. To Johnston, This was a symbolic act, one meant to humiliate his enemies and amplify his reputation. Other tribes, such as the Blackfeet, also faced his wrath. Once, they captured and mistreated him, but even their actions paled in comparison to the vengeance he unleashed on the Crow. They came to know him as Dayak Absroka, the Crow Killer, a name that spread terror across the plains. Johnston's growing notoriety became a weapon in its own right. Warriors ambushing him under the cover of darkness would flee in panic when he struck down just one of their own. Even in the rare times he was captured, other tribes hesitated to harm him, hoping instead to trade him back to the Crow for a hefty price. But Johnston's abilities were not limited to vengeance. He had an uncanny ability to manipulate the rivalries between tribes, turning them against each other and emerging with both scalps and alliances. While his thirst for revenge might have been born of personal grief, it soon became a tool, a means to cement his status as a fearsome figure in the brutal power dynamics of the frontier. Even before this dark chapter of his life, John Johnston had already made a name for himself as a trapper of great strength and cunning. His skills in the wilderness earned him respect, but his stoic and guarded nature added an air of mystery. He was known as a man of few words, someone who spoke only when it was necessary to share his insights or set the record straight. This silence, combined with his reputation for relentless action, only fueled the myth surrounding him. In the rugged world of the frontier, allies could often be as important as enemies. John Johnston's first companion was the famed and talkative trapper, John Hatcher. Hatcher, with his knack for storytelling, was quick to share tales about Johnston, though not all of them painted the future legend in a heroic light. In early accounts, Johnston was portrayed as a greenhorn, a naive newcomer to the wilderness. He was said to have been outsmarted by the sly trader Joe Robidoux and even caught off guard by Hatcher at his own campfire. Yet as the stories grew, so did Johnston's reputation. The once green trapper outmaneuvered Robidoux in a horse trade and demonstrated his sharp instincts by noticing a supposedly dead warrior preparing to attack before even Hatcher could. This blend of cunning and strength soon became central to the legend of liver-eating Johnston. Johnston's most enduring partnership was with Del Guay, another colorful trapper and a man as invested in spreading Johnston's legend as Johnston himself. Del had a simple philosophy: know when not to ask questions, but even he couldn't resist documenting the incredible events he witnessed alongside Johnston. One of the most dramatic moments came when Del accompanied Johnston on a journey to the cabin of Crazy Woman, the feared widow of John Morgan. It was during this time that Del saw Johnston confront and defeat the last of 20 warriors the Crow had sent to avenge their fallen. Though hardened by frontier life, Del admitted to feeling queasy as he watched Johnston extract and supposedly consume the liver of his enemy, a chilling act that added fuel to the legend. Del lived to recount these stories well after Johnston's death, passing them on to J.F. Anderson, also known as White Tie, ensuring that the myth of liver-eating Johnston would endure. The legend, however, isn't merely about brutality. Johnston's association with figures like Crazy Woman, a character whose nightly wails for her dead echoed like a chorus of fate, adds layers of complexity to his story. Even his foes, the Crow, are remembered in the legend for their dignity and wisdom. Their act of sending 20 warriors to individually seek vengeance against Johnston reflects their own deep sense of honor and drama. Johnston's allies, too, were an eccentric group of mountain men who joined his bloody feud. Together they carved a history that, while brutal, was anything but ordinary. It would be easy to dismiss Johnston as nothing more than a savage, a man consumed by vengeance and madness, but such a view would miss the nuance of his character. Johnston wasn't simply inhuman or insane. His actions often reflected a sense of order and principles, even in a world of chaos. He stepped back from acts of barbarity that others might indulge in, as if they offended his own moral code. While Johnston undoubtedly shared the prejudices of his era toward native peoples, he also harbored a profound respect for the warriors he fought. Over time, this respect grew into something transformative. In an unexpected twist, Johnston's relentless vendetta against the Crow ended not in mutual destruction, but in reconciliation. He came to admire the courage and magnanimity of the Crow, and eventually, they accepted him as an ally, a brother in arms. As we wrap up the excerpt from Crow Killer, the saga of liver-eating Johnston, it's time to turn the page to an eye-opening article from Old West magazine, written by Harry J. Owens, titled The Truth About Liver-Eating Johnston. This piece seeks to dismantle some of the most persistent myths surrounding Johnston and reveal the man behind the legend. One of the first misconceptions addressed is Johnston's name itself. While some sources refer to him as John Johnson, historical records confirm that his name was indeed John Johnston. This is the name he consistently used in official documents, such as the patent for his homestead south of Red Lodge, issued on February 4, 1897, and in his military pension applications. Another fictional element tied to his identity is the name Jeremiah Johnson, popularized by Hollywood. Where the film industry conjured this name remains unclear, though Owens humorously suggests it might have been inspired by a biblical vision. One of the most enduring tales surrounding Johnston is that he waged a bloody vendetta against the Crow tribe after they allegedly killed his Flathead wife. However, Owens unequivocally debunks this claim. Contrary to the legend, Johnston was no enemy of the Crow. In fact, he was their trusted ally and friend. The Crow referred to Johnston as Black Bear, a name of respect. They often sought his advice in matters of war and strategy, particularly in their conflicts with the Blackfeet. Johnston's connection to the Crow ran so deep that they welcomed him as one of their own, a stark contrast to the vengeful image painted by myth. If Johnston had any true adversaries, it was the Blackfeet. His participation in revenge raids against them made him a target for over a decade. Despite their efforts, the Blackfeet couldn't capture him, though they came close on one occasion near the Missouri River. 3 warriors ambushed Johnston, but with one powerful swing of his rifle, he knocked 2 of them down and made a daring escape to a nearby post. In one of Johnston's early letters, he directly refuted claims that he had ever been married to a Flathead woman or kept a native wife. He wrote, "I deny that I am or ever was a squaw man, or ever kept a squaw or wife or otherwise. Any statement to the contrary is a malicious falsehood." This declaration, combined with the absence of any historical evidence to support the Crow vendetta narrative, underscores the fabricated nature of the Crow Killer legend. The story of John Johnston begins far from the rugged landscapes of Montana or the legends of the Crow Killer. Born in Henderson County, New Jersey, his exact birth year remains debated. While Civil War enlistment records suggest 1830, later pension applications claim 1824. A recently discovered death certificate from California indicates he was 76 at the time of his passing in January 1900, making 1823 the most likely year of his birth. As a young man, Johnston's life took him to the open seas. He joined a whaling vessel, enduring the harsh and dangerous life of a sailor. But after only a few voyages, he left the whaling trade to enlist in the United States Navy, where he served during the Mexican-American War. It was here that Johnston demonstrated both his fiery temperament and an early sense of justice. One of the few incidents Johnston ever recounted from his naval service involved an act of defiance that spoke to his character. A lieutenant, who happened to be the son of a commodore, struck one of Johnston's comrades with the flat of his sword. Watching this injustice unfold, Johnston reacted instinctively, delivering a blow to the officer's neck so powerful it knocked him unconscious on the deck. When the lieutenant recovered, he suspected Johnston but lacked evidence, as none of the crew betrayed their fellow sailor. Despite escaping capital punishment, Johnston faced consequences. Denied shore leave for 30 days, he eventually gained liberty, and with it, made a life-changing decision. He never returned to the Navy and instead drifted westward, where his journey into legend would begin. As the Civil War erupted, John Johnston found himself in the Colorado Territory. Answering the call to service, he enlisted in St. Louis, Missouri on February 24, 1864, joining Company A, 3rd Regiment of the Colorado Volunteer Cavalry. Initially serving as a teamster under Price's command, Johnston later transferred to Company H, 2nd Regiment, Colorado Volunteer Cavalry on April 23, 1864. Johnston saw fierce combat in Missouri, fighting in skirmishes at Westport, Little Santa Fe, Mine Creek, and Newtonia. These battles left their mark. He suffered a gunshot wound to his left shoulder at Westport and another wound to his right leg below the knee at Newtonia. Following treatment in Kansas City, he returned to duty until his discharge at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, on September 23, 1865. Despite these injuries, Johnston's warrior spirit remained unbroken. He headed west to Bannock, Montana, where his life of adventure resumed, blending military service as a scout with his reputation as a fearsome Indian fighter. Noted frontiersman William T. Uncle Billy Hamilton, famous for his bravery and sign-talking, once described Johnston as brave and cool a warrior as ever drew a bead on an Indian. How did John Johnston acquire his infamous nickname? The most credible account comes from Johnston himself, a tale of grit, fury, and raw survival. "We was attacked by Injuns, and we licked them good," Johnston recounted. "There was 15 of us, and we killed 36 of them and wounded 60. It was toward the close of the fight that I got my name." Johnston described the battle in visceral detail. Running low on ammunition, he handed his gun to a companion, Bill Martin, and took up Martin's knife instead. Spotting an enemy fleeing toward cover, Johnston decided not to waste precious bullets. "We had a 300-yard run to the bushes, and I caught the Injun by the hair of the head and threw him down just at the edge of the brush," he said. "I danced and sang on the Injun's body, for that's what they'd done to a party of whites a few days before." Then came the gruesome moment that sealed his legend. After scalping the warrior, Johnston plunged his knife into him, unintentionally dislodging a piece of liver. At that moment, a squeamish man named Ross ran up, witnessing the gory aftermath. The legend of liver-eating Johnston took a dramatic turn during an encounter near the Musselshell River, close to its junction with the Missouri River, around the year 1870. It was here that Johnston's infamous nickname solidified, not from an act of cannibalism, as the tales suggest, but from a misunderstanding born out of chaos and bloodshed. With a piece of liver impaled on his knife, Johnston waved it in the air, taunting a nearby companion. "Come on and have a piece. It'll stay your stomach till you get home to dinner," Johnston cried, laughing and dancing around. "Don't want none," his comrade Ross replied, visibly disturbed. Feigning a bite, Johnston joked, "It's just as good as antelope liver." But the sight of the blood-covered Johnston and the liver was too much for Ross, who promptly vomited. Later, Ross swore he'd seen Johnston tear the liver from a dying Sioux warrior and eat it raw, a claim Johnston always denied. "I didn't eat it," Johnston insisted. "The liver came out by accident," but Ross stuck to his story, and I never got rid of the name. That fateful encounter was part of a larger clash involving 15 white men, split into two camps, cutting bullpine and cottonwood for steamboats. The morning began quietly, with Crow Davis and his wife, the first to rise, gathering wood for the breakfast fire. But Davis's wife soon noticed something troubling. The camp was surrounded. Speaking in a low, controlled voice, she warned Davis of the danger while continuing to pick up wood, trying not to alarm the watching warriors. Davis, understanding the gravity of the situation, calmly collected a few more sticks and walked back to the camp as if nothing were amiss. His wife, however, could not maintain the ruse for long. As she neared the camp, the tension broke. She screamed, dropped her bundle of wood, and ran. A single shot from the trees ended her dash, and she fell to the ground, wounded but not fatally. Her courage, or perhaps her lack of fear, had bought the camp precious time. Johnston seized the opportunity to act. Johnston quickly devised a plan. 3 men armed with Winchester rifles crossed the river to take a defensible position overlooking the coulee, while Johnston organized the rest to block every possible escape route. The ambush that followed was devastating. The Sioux warriors, caught off guard, faced relentless and deadly fire from across the river. As they attempted to return fire or find cover, Johnston's men adjusted their positions, keeping the pressure constant. The Sioux, realizing the hopelessness of their situation, began digging holes in the riverbank for protection, but even this effort was futile. One by one, they were picked off. Desperate, the Sioux called for a powwow, seeking a truce. But Johnston, remembering the ruthlessness shown to settlers just days before, refused. "The Sioux must taste their own medicine," he reportedly declared. The Sioux, overwhelmed and desperate, called for a truce, a chance to end the bloodshed as a draw. But John Johnston refused. The Sioux must taste their own medicine, he declared. There would be no terms. As the battle raged, the Sioux warriors, trapped in the coulee, were unable to match the firepower of Johnston's men. Their arrows and limited firearms were ineffective against the relentless assault. Eventually, faced with certain death, the remaining warriors made a desperate charge. Johnston, ever the tactician, had anticipated their move. He stationed most of his men in a small hollow along the path the warriors were forced to take. As the Sioux broke from their cover and ran, the men across the river unleashed a withering barrage. Then at close range, Johnston's group opened fire. The deadly hail of bullets cut the charging warriors down, leaving their bodies scattered across the plains. In just one volley, the battle was decided. The fight, however, was not over. Many wounded Sioux had crawled away to hide along the riverbanks, hoping for survival. Johnston and his men were determined not to let a single warrior escape, knowing it could mean death for their own group later. The pursuit was merciless. Some warriors, wounded and defenseless, pleaded for their lives. Others accepted their fate with stoic dignity, receiving the final blow in silence. Among them, Johnston found a warrior crawling toward the prairie, leaving a trail of blood in his wake. When the warrior heard Johnston approaching, he turned for one last fight, only to find himself unarmed and defenseless. Johnston, cold and deliberate, dropped his rifle and drew his hunting knife, testing its sharpness. Grabbing the Sioux by a brass ring in his ear, Johnston bent the warrior over his knee, twisted his head back, and delivered a swift, fatal slice. Returning to his comrades, Johnston carried his rifle in one hand and his bloodied knife in the other. A small strip of flesh hung from the blade, catching the attention of a fellow trapper. "What's that?" the man asked. "That," Johnston replied with a smirk, "is a piece of Indian liver. I just had a feast off one and thought maybe some of you would like a taste. Try it." Though Johnston had only been bluffing, he had thrown the liver to the ground. His comrades saw the red streaks on his beard and believed he had eaten it. From that day on, the name Liver-Eating Johnston spread far and wide. In 1877, following the infamous Battle of Little Bighorn and the Custer Massacre, Johnston joined General Nelson Miles at Fort Keogh, Montana. Miles sent Johnston and 10 men on a scouting mission to locate hostile forces. They discovered a large group of warriors entrenched behind a hill. Outnumbered, Johnston and his men retreated to a nearby hill with better cover. The battle was fierce. Johnston's group, well armed and positioned, withstood multiple attacks from the warriors trying to dislodge them. By the end of the day, more than 40 warriors lay dead, while Johnston's men suffered no casualties. As night fell, the warriors withdrew, allowing the scouts to return to Miles's camp. Recognizing the precariousness of their position, Johnston advised General Miles to retreat, and the general wisely followed his counsel. The next day, a large force of Cheyennes joined the warriors, but by then, Miles and his men were long gone. Many credited Johnston's tactical prowess and quick thinking with saving the general's small force. In the harsh winter of 1868, John Johnston, struggling with his trapping efforts, joined forces with Beadler, a figure of some renown from the Montana vigilantes. Together, they turned to cutting cordwood for the steamboats traveling the Missouri River. By the spring of 1869, their efforts had drawn the attention of the steamboat Nile, which stopped at their woodyard near the mouth of the Muscle Shell River to purchase supplies. What began as a routine transaction turned into a memorable event. The Nile's captain invited Johnston and Beadler aboard for a celebration, his birthday. Among the festivities, ice cream was served, a delicacy neither Johnston nor Beadler had ever encountered before. Its coldness, particularly in the warmth of the afternoon, left the pair deeply suspicious. Where in the hell does this stuff come from?" Johnston whispered, eyeing the dessert warily. "Shut up, you fool," Beadler hissed, forcing down a spoonful. "It comes in cans." Adding to the humor, the steamboat passengers, several well-to-do ladies, struck up conversations with the rugged frontiersmen. One exchange in particular highlighted the cultural divide. "Mr. Beadler, are you married?" one lady asked with exaggerated politeness. "Yes," Beadler grunted. "Oh, how interesting. Is your wife a white woman?" "Indian," Beadler replied bluntly. "How delightful," the woman exclaimed. "A native of the Great Plains. And where is she now? I've sent her to Rome, Beedler deadpanned. To Rome to be educated? How noble. No, Beedler growled. To Rome on the prairie. The sharp wit of Beedler brought the conversation to an abrupt end, much to Johnston's amusement. As the West evolved into a cultural spectacle, Wild West shows became a popular entertainment form. Johnston was recruited to participate in one such show, designed to rival Buffalo Bill's Wild West extravaganza. Advertised as the avenging fury of the plains, Johnston shared the stage with Indian chiefs and sharpshooters. However, the show failed financially in Iowa, and Johnston, ever resourceful, simply walked back to Montana. Despite the failure, Johnston left a favorable impression on Eastern audiences, cementing his reputation as a legendary frontiersman. His fame even attracted critics, including an unnamed officer from General Howard's command, who belittled Johnston's contributions during the Nez Perce campaign of 1877. Johnston refused to let the insult pass. In 1884, he responded with biting words in a Billings, Montana newspaper, directly addressing the claims made in the Pioneer Press. In the Pioneer Press of the 21st instance, nearly a column is devoted to a sketch of myself and some of my adventures as detailed to a credulous reporter of that paper by a Jim Crow subaltern of the 7th Cavalry. The smart aleck who undertakes to tell the Pioneer Press about me has not the manhood to back up his claims by stating his name. However, I suspect who he is, and am inclined to think him as big a poltroon now as he showed himself to be when a petty lieutenant in the Nez Perce War. Johnston's fiery response served as a reminder of his fierce pride and unwillingness to let anyone tarnish his legacy. John Johnston's reputation as a fearless scout, warrior, and leader was well earned. Serving as the leading scout and guide for Sturgis's command, and at times for General Howard, Johnston navigated treacherous terrain and led troops through hostile territory with unmatched skill. Both officers, during the campaigns and after their conclusion, praised Johnston for his deep knowledge of the land, his precision in guiding troops, and his bravery under fire. As far as grit goes, Johnston declared, I don't need to prove myself to any second lieutenant. His boldness extended beyond his words. Johnston boasted of having fought in 40 battles with native warriors, from California to the Gulf of Mexico, claiming, I've killed more Indians than all the officers of the 7th Cavalry combined, regiment and all. And when a cowardly officer tried to tarnish his reputation, Johnston's fiery response left no doubt about his resolve. If he ever dares name himself, I'll make him think a piece of Judgment Day struck him. Johnston's towering presence was as much a part of his legend as his exploits. Standing over 6 feet tall and weighing 220 pounds of pure muscle, he was a man hardened by the demands of the frontier. His strength and endurance were unmatched, even by the warriors he fought. Fatigue seemed a foreign concept to him. With a thick, unkempt growth of jet-black whiskers and an imposing mane of hair, Johnston cut an unforgettable figure. His cold, steel-gray eyes reflected both cunning and resolve, traits that served him well in countless battles and wilderness challenges. Unlike many frontier dandies who adorned themselves with elaborate attire, Johnston preferred the simplicity of buckskin clothing, worn plain and functional. Johnston's hunger for life extended to his legendary appetite for meat. During one winter along the Marios River, northwest of modern-day Great Falls, Montana, Johnston hunted and consumed 13 buffalo. After shooting and hanging the carcasses near his cabin, he spent the season feasting on the meat. By spring, little remained of the massive haul. In 1881, Johnston transitioned from frontiersman to lawman when he was appointed deputy sheriff of Colson, Montana Territory by Sheriff Tom Irvine of Custer County. Known for its lawlessness, Colson was a wild town where trouble was common. Yet when Sheriff Irvine arrived to check on Johnston's progress, he found an oddly quiet settlement. Say, John, why haven't you sent any prisoners to the county jail? Irvine asked. Johnston, with his characteristic bluntness, replied, How in hell could I arrest anybody? There ain't no jail here to put them in after I arrest them. Instead of traditional arrests, Johnston had his own approach to justice. I just beat hell out of the ones who should be arrested and turn them loose. I've never had to arrest the same man twice. This unconventional method, though rough, kept the peace in Colson, a testament to Johnston's unique brand of frontier law enforcement. As progress swept through the West, the arrival of the railroad in Billings marked the end of the once thriving town of Colson, Montana. With Colson gone, John Johnston moved to Billings, but soon abandoned his role as a lawman. Seeking a quieter life, Johnston settled on an island in the Yellowstone River, where he began farming, a dramatic shift from his days as a frontiersman and scout. He poured his effort into raising cabbages, but when harvest time came, the reward was bitter. Offered a mere 3 cents per pound for his crop, Johnston was incensed. "I sweated over them damned cabbages all summer long for 3 cents a pound," he told a friend. "I'll go build me a cabin in the mountains where I can kill all I want, and I'll never work again." True to his word, Johnston left the island and moved to Red Lodge, Montana, homesteading on 160 acres of land, about 3 miles south of the town. His homestead patent was signed on February 4, 1897, by President Grover Cleveland. Despite his retreat to the mountains, Johnston remained a larger-than-life figure in Red Lodge. He cultivated a garden, potato patch, and even raised hay, but the call of duty found him again. Johnston became the first constable of the new town and served multiple terms, enforcing the law in his own unconventional style. Ben Greeniff, a local timber gatherer who once stayed with Johnston, recounted an unforgettable moment. "I remember one time in George Howard's saloon, there were 2 old Scotch miners, drunk and brawling on the floor. Johnston passed by, looked in, and saw them. Without a word, he walked in, picked both men up, one under each arm, and carried them out. Johnston didn't stop there. He laid them across the hitching pole outside, banged their heads together, and dropped them in the dirt before walking away. I thought he'd killed them," Greeniff recalled, but a few minutes later, they got up, put their arms around each other, and walked off, sober and peaceful. Johnston's softer side shone through in his interactions with the town's children. Fred Longmore, a young boy who knew him well, remembered asking Johnston, "Mr. Johnston, did you really cut out an Indian's liver and eat it?" With a twinkle in his eye, Johnston replied, "That's what they say, sonny." Another local, O.J. Salo, fondly remembered the kindness of the legendary scout. "He'd give me a nickel and always told me, 'Kid, don't spend that on anything but licorice.' The second time he gave me a nickel, he called me Snowtop because of my white hair. For the boys in town who couldn't afford to see shows at the Finn Opera House, Johnston had a solution. He would hoist them onto his shoulders and lift them to the balcony, where older boys inside pulled them in to enjoy the performance for free. As the 19th century came to a close, so too did the life of the legendary liver-eating Johnston. On December 9, 1899, his health broken and without the means to support himself, Johnston departed Red Lodge, Montana, for the National Soldiers' Home in Santa Monica, California. It was a bittersweet moment for the citizens of Red Lodge, who held him in high regard. Fred Longmore, one of Johnston's young friends, accompanied him to the train station and later reflected, "I grew to be a friend to Mr. Johnston. He was good to me and very kind." The Carbon County Democrat captured the sentiment of the town. John Liver-Eating Johnston departed Saturday for California, where he has permission to enter the Soldiers' Home. The health of the old scout has been failing very sadly for the past year, and his once powerful physique is not recognizable now in the feeble and broken-down old man who boarded Saturday's train. Just over a month after leaving Red Lodge, on January 21, 1900, news of Johnston's death reached his old hometown. He passed away at the National Soldiers' Home in California. The town mourned his loss, convinced that leaving the Beartooth country, which he loved so dearly, had hastened his passing. His legacy as a scout, frontiersman, and enigmatic figure remained strong. Sergeant Whitehead of the Soldiers' Home wrote to the editor of the Red Lodge Picket, "Dear Sir, thinking some of his friends might be interested, I write to inform you and them that John Johnston, better known there as Liver-Eating Johnston, died at this home yesterday and was buried here today." In 1975, decades after Johnston's death, a government agency authorized the disinterment of his remains. In a move that many considered disrespectful, Johnston's body was relocated to Old Trail Town in Cody, Wyoming, a site that some felt was more of a tourist attraction than a proper resting place. His beloved Beartooth Mountains, which he had called home, were nowhere in sight. Yet Johnston might have appreciated the irony. When his grave was opened, Only a leg bone and a few fragments of his cedar coffin remained. His spirit, as many believe, continues to roam free over the lands he cherished. John Johnston's extraordinary life inspired Hollywood, most notably the film Jeremiah Johnson, starring Robert Redford. Redford himself served as one of Johnston's pallbearers when his remains were reinterred in Old Trail Town. Among others buried there are legendary frontiersmen like Jim White, Jack Stilwell, Philip Vedder, and Belle Drury, a woman whose life was tragically cut short in 1897. Despite the enduring myths, questions remain. Did Johnston truly eat the livers of his enemies? Was he the Crow Killer, as some stories suggest? The Old West magazine article, while titled The Truth About Liver-Eating Johnston, provides no citations to validate many claims, relying instead on the memoirs of White-Eye Anderson. The truth about liver-eating Johnston lies somewhere between legend and history. While his vendetta against the Crow tribe remains unproven, his legacy as a figure of frontier resilience and complexity endures. What do you think? Was Johnston the fierce Crow Killer, or has history exaggerated his story? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let us know what aspects of Johnston's life resonate with you. Let's continue to explore and preserve the stories that shaped the American West.